Shabbat. Yeah, we may have to shorten this a little bit. We'll see how it goes. I think we will. Okay, I think we will, but okay. All right. The Torah portion for today is called ki-tetsei, which means when you go out. And in my Torah, it's composed of 3 sections. The social will, number 1, from Deuteronomy 21st chapter, 10th verse to the 26th chapter, 12th verse. And the second one is the social will, Deuteronomy 22nd chapter, 13th verse to the 24th chapter, 22nd verse. And then the social will 3, Deuteronomy 25th chapter, verse 1 through chapter 26, verse 19. Oh wait, I didn't. It's yeah, 21. I'm sorry. Yeah, Deuteronomy 21st chapter, verse 25, 1 through. Oh, it's not so far. Okay, verse 1 through 19. Okay, and it begins, ki-tetsei lemilchama, excuse me, al ibecha unotenu Adonai Elohecha beyadecha veshafta shivyu v'ra'iti beshavya ishit yafe to'ar v'chashakta ba velekachta lecha leisha. When you take the field against your enemies, and the Lord your God delivers them into your power, and you take some of them captive, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman, and you desire her, and would take her to wife, you shall bring her into your house, and she shall trim her hair, par her nails.
Psalm 34. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continuously be in my mouth. My soul shall make its boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear of it and be glad. O magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and delivered me from all my fears. They looked to him and were radiant, and their faces were not ashamed. The poor man cried out, and the Lord heard him, and saved him out of all his trouble. The angel of the Lord encamps all around those who fear him, and delivers them. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who trusts in him. O fear the Lord, you his saints. There is no want to those who fear him. The young lion lacks and suffers hunger, but those who seek the Lord shall not lack any good thing. Come, you children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. Who is the man who desires life and loves many days, that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil, and your lips from spreading deceit. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to those, open to their cry. The face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to cut off the remembrance of them from the earth. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. The Lord is near to those who have a broken heart, and saves such as have a contrite spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. He guards all his bones, not one of them is broken. Evil shall slay the wicked, and those who hate the righteous shall be condemned. The Lord redeems the soul of his servants, and none of those who trust in him shall be condemned. This is the word of the Lord. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. May your kingdom come. May your will be done. We give thanks to you, Lord God, for bringing us to another Shabbat, another time to remember your great love and your mercy and grace, to remember the deliverance you gave to us and to your children Israel. A time to rest and a time to worship, a time to acknowledge the freedom and to enjoy that freedom. For in 6 days we work, but on this day you hollowed out and commanded us to rest, to show that we're no longer slaves to sin, that that the price for sin has been paid by Christ on the cross. And you delivered your children Israel out of Egypt with a mighty arm. You delivered them from the house of bondage and commanded them also on this day to celebrate that freedom. We celebrate a freedom from bondage and sin and from the penalty that sin required. For it was done by you, the deliverance from Egypt, and done by your Son, the freeing us from the penalty of sin. We give thanks to you, Lord God, to the Son and to the Spirit, who delivers and keeps promises. And it is in your name we pray. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem means ha'art. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who gives us bread from the earth. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Berei pri hagafen. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who gives us the fruit of the vine. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat. Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.
All right. We have a lot of rules this week. Last week we had Shoftim, and it's an extensive system of justice according to Shabbat Table Talk. So we have a lot of commandments. And as we started reading, we'll read the first section, and then we'll take a small break after the first section and read the other two sections. But it is entitled The Social Wheel, Part 1. When you take the field against your enemies, and the Lord your God delivers them into your power, and you take some of them captive, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman, if you desire her and would take her to wife, you shall bring her into your house, and she shall trim her hair, part her nails, and discard her captive's guards. She will spend a month's time in your house, lamenting her father and mother. After that you may come to her and possess her. She shall be your wife. Then should you no longer want her, you must release her outright. You must not sell money, since you had your will of her. You must not enslave her. If a man has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and both the loved and the unloved have borne him sons, but the firstborn is the son of the unloved one. When he wills his property to his sons, he may not treat his as firstborn the son of the loved one in disregard of the son of the unloved one, who is older. Instead, he must accept the firstborn, the son of the unloved one, and allot him a double portion of all he possesses, since he is the first fruit of his vigor. The birthright is his due. If a man has a wayward and defiant son who does not heed his father or mother, and that does not obey them even after they discipline him, his father and mother shall take hold of him, bring him out to the elders of his town at the public place of his community. They shall say to the elders of his town, "This son of ours is disloyal and defiant. He does not heed us. He is glutton and a drunkard." Thereupon the men of his town shall stone him to death, that you will sweep out evil from your midst. All Israel will hear and be afraid. If a man is guilty of a capital offense and is put to death, and you impale him on a stake, you must not let his corpse remain on the stake overnight. You must bury him the same day, for an impaled body is an affront to God. You shall not defile the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. If you see your fellow's ox or sheep gone astray, do not ignore it. You must take it back to your fellow. If a fellow does not live near you and you do not know who he is, you shall bring it home, and it shall remain with you until your fellow claims it. Then you shall give it back to him. You shall do the same with his ass. You shall do the same with his garment. And so too shall you do with anything that your fellow loses. And you will find you must not remain indifferent. If you see your fellow's ass or ox fallen on the road, do not ignore it. You must help him raise it. A woman must not put on a man's apparel, nor shall a man wear women's clothing. For whoever does these things is abhorrent to the Lord your God. If along the road you chance upon a bird's nest, in any tree or on the ground, with fledglings or eggs, the mother sitting over the fledglings or the eggs, do not take the mother together with her young. Let the mother go and take only the young, in order that you may fare well and have a long life. When you build a new house, you shall make a parapet for your roof, so that you do not bring blood guilt on your house, if anyone should fall on it. You shall not sow your vineyard with second kind of seed, else the crop from the seed you have sown, and the yield of your vineyard may not be used. You shall not plow with an ox and an ass together. You shall not wear a cloth binding wool and linen. You shall make tassels on the four corners of the garments which you cover yourself. Okay, there's a lot of prohibitions in this particular passage, but what I would like to probably dwell upon, these prohibitions probably help make sense out of what happened to Jesus or Yeshua. One of the things was that there's a capital offense, and you impale someone on the stake or crucified, you must take the body corpse down. It shall not remain overnight. You must bury him the same day. And if you remember during the crucifixion, when Jesus was crucified, they had to take his body down that same day. Then another thing, again, there are a lot of prohibitions. One I think is rather clear. A woman must not put on a man's apparel, nor a man wear women's apparel. It is abhorrent to God. That's pretty clear right there. And then the last one about wearing tassels on your four corners of your garment is they're called tzitzit, and the tassels are reminders of God's ever presence. And you'll see a lot of, not necessarily Orthodox, although probably it's more in Orthodoxy, they wear this, it's like a white vest, and at the end it'll be the tzitzit. Sometimes you'll see them hanging down along the man's pant leg. Sometimes they put them inside the pant leg so you don't see them. But if you ever see someone like that and they have a long tassel down, they're probably Orthodox Jew, and they're wearing a tzitzit. So just remember that. Anything else? Anybody else?
Well, I didn't count them, but I was told there was about 72 or maybe 74 commandments here, with 27 positive, 47 were negative, and they cover a lot of ground here, even from relationships to how you treat your enemies and women and dress and that kind of thing. A couple of things I wanted to point out, and I think we talked about this one once before. In verse 18 it says, if a man has a stubborn son and rebellious son, who won't obey them, then they have the brings them out to the elders, and they can stone him. And I think when we talked about it, I said, well, did this ever happen? And the Bible never records an incident where this happened. There are two things at play here. One, if the kid is that bad, the parents has to bear some responsibility for that too. If the kid is really that bad, then the parents are liable and are responsible for that. But the idea, you just, the stoning, yeah, it said it, but that was just an extreme, and I don't think it was ever intended for it to be carried out.
I'm just asking the question. If you don't think it was meant to be carried out, then why would there be a law made?
Why? Just to show this how severe it is. You know, if it gets that bad, what's the ultimate punishment for that? No, just to show it's very, very bad. But if it was, maybe I could ask you the same question. If it was intended, why wouldn't he show an example of it as well? Why wouldn't there be an example as well?
It doesn't have to always be an example of something. Here's a law, and I'm sure God made it for a reason. I'm sure, you know who I'm thinking about now, I don't know if it'll apply to this. You remember the man who went out on Shabbat and was gathering
sticks,
sticks. He was desecrating Shabbat. So
Right.
what did they do to him?
They took him to Moses and they eventually stoned him.
So I'm
Which
sure
was an
there was
example.
you should not desecrate the Sabbath.
Right.
There's a law.
And there's an example of someone doing that.
Okay, but again, just because it's not an example doesn't mean it didn't happen. I'm just throwing that out.
Okay, doesn't mean that it.
It doesn't mean that there was a case
Didn't
where
happen.
where it didn't happen. It
Sure.
doesn't mean that just because you didn't get an example of it.
Okay, all right, I'll refine it. Although this command is there, but I was saying there's no example in the Bible where this would ever happen. Maybe I'll just leave it that way.
Yeah, just leave it that way.
So,
I would leave it that way.
okay. All right. Another point in verse 6, it speaks of if there's a bird in a nest, and if you want the eggs of the bird that are in the nest, the baby birds, what you will do is shoot the mother bird away. One, if you don't shoot a mother bird away, she may be defensive. Chances are she will be defensive because she wants to protect her young. So one commentator said you shoot the bird away to reduce the suffering from the bird. When it comes back, find you trying to take the eggs out or the baby birds out, the bird would suffer more. So essentially, you shoot a bird away to reduce the likelihood of the bird suffering. So it's an idea of suffering there. The last one I did make a quick note of. You should not plow with an ox or a donkey. One, I think we mentioned before, some groups thought it was a fertility rite. One commentator said, well, if you use the two and they're not the same, you'll probably overwork one of them, and that's why the prohibition is there, not to overwork the animal. Then again, there's the idea of suffering too, I guess, if you overwork one and not the other. There could be something there, but I'm still going back to hinge on that fertility rite, and that's what I think goes on there. The last one I had almost nothing on that one. Is if you can marry your enemies, the women, you can't treat them as slaves, but if you don't like them, you can let them go. I guess they go as free women. That was interesting. I didn't do much work on that one.
Okay.
Interesting concept, but that's all I have for now.
Well, I think all of these kind of speak for themselves. And you can go into the whys. You may never know why, but God has put down these prohibitions. Now, it's not for us to decide why God did, but there are a lot of prohibitions here. Sometimes we find out why. I'll go back to this one here about burying the bodies, because I see in my commentary they were saying that even the worst criminal, because if he was on a stake, he probably was considered he was worthy of death, so he's a pretty rough criminal. But even that person was, you were required to show dignity by taking his body off the stake. It could not remain overnight.
It's an element of humanity, yeah.
Yes, even for the worst criminal, that because there's a sacredness about that. And in Judaism, a lot of times they bury the person within 24 hours. In Israel, if you hear somebody die within 20, unless it's something really strange, within 24 hours they're gone. Definitely within 3 days they're buried.
Yeah.
They're buried. There's no keeping the body out. For one thing, they don't embalm, so you don't. So you can't keep a body out if you don't embalm it, or so it is very important to bury that. And I know in other cultures, but
Still doesn't say they don't. Just say they don't embalm.
No, they don't. No. That's why one reason for the quickness of it, and because it's considered to mess around with the body too much like that, it's not. They don't consider that good. And matter of fact, I know the Egyptians were into embalming and everything, all that kind of stuff to preserve it. But according to Scripture, again, what happens when we die? The spirit goes back to God, and the body goes back to the dust. So they don't do anything to the body that's not going to allow it to decay and go back to the dust, because that's a sacred. But in other cultures, you see them trying to, preserve the bodies. And matter of fact, I'm going to bring out a couple of things which I didn't know. You see all these. If you look, you see all these monuments around the world. You see the pyramids, and even there are pyramids in Central America, Mexico. Pyramids. They found pyramids in China. I'd say pyramids, but great mounds. And the Taj Mahal, I consider that like a pyramid or whatever. But do you know what that is? I just found that out. You know what that is?
It said this guy fell in love with this lady. He built it to try and gain her affection. I don't think she ever moved into it. I don't know. I think maybe he died before it was finished.
Her body is there.
Or her body is there. Okay.
It's a mausoleum.
Right. Oh, okay.
It's a burial chamber.
Oh, so she died before it was finished.
It's a burial, and a lot of times, if you see, matter of fact, and you talk about, let me try to remember the place it is, Petra. They were. If Petra was in the Indiana Jones movie where the city is carved out of rock, and they were doing some research on it because they were saying, well, what is this? That they would do this. I mean, it's so intricate. Well, new finding is they think it was a mausoleum, a burial ground. But most times when you do see pyramids of any sort, whether it be in South America or Egypt or whatever, they're burial chambers. Because people went to great length, people who didn't know the Lord went to great lengths in order to have that person have some whatever in the afterlife. And so they would spend decades or years building places for their death. I thought that, I mean, when I found about the Taj Mahal, that just really floored me. That I didn't think it, and I hope I'm calling it the right name because it's that big structure in India. I thought it was just a really nice palace or something like that, but it's a burial chamber. And so you have to, so you can put two and two together. Whereas with the Jews, they didn't. That was not important to preserve the body because the body went back to the dust. And the soul, which was the most important thing, went to God. So you're not going to be making any kind of big structure for that. That was for God to do. But here, these people, especially the pharaohs, all of that work and people being killed, to make a burial chamber, a place where they could go to the afterlife. Very fascinating. When I found that out, I started looking at all these structures that people built, these big buildings and mausoleums and they in a different light because it's mostly related to death that they did it. So anyway, next time you look at something, and also you look at the stuff that happened at Stonehenge in England. Those are another structures. They claim that they were giants or stuff. But again, they may be burial chambers. I can't think of any more other than that. But
something too.
Korea,
Peru.
Yes. They're burial chambers.
No, something.
They're burial chambers. That's all they are. That says a lot. But with the God of Israel, again, they're more concerned about the soul as opposed to the body, because those people went to great lengths to preserve the body. Great lengths, but you won't find that in Judaism where they're trying to preserve the body. The body's not meant to be preserved, it's meant to go back to the dust. That's why it's interesting. A lot of people don't know that in Israel, I mean, if you just notice now, you pay attention, again, like if a soldier is killed, 24 hours, that soldier's put into the ground. And and you usually see them wrapped in a talit, the prayer shawl. You'll see them wrapped in that, and that's it. Because again, they don't want to do anything to prevent the body from going back to the dust. And then what they do, if you notice, they had these things that they found. They said they found one that had the name of Jesus's brother on it, James or whatever. But they make these small boxes. They gather the bones together. That's what they would have done with Jesus if he had not risen from the grave. He was put in a tomb, and what happens is they put the spices on the body again for the smell, and then then it's no embalming. You're just wanting the flesh to rot from the bones, and they collect the bones and put in these little coffins, for a better word. That's what they did. If you heard the term bone collectors, they do that a lot. And I was surprised that in New Orleans, because of the high water table, they have these kinds of things where they just put them in the mausoleum or whatever, and once they decay, then somebody goes and collects the bones and put them in smaller little containers. Anyway, just an interesting side note I thought. Okay, we're gonna take a break here, and then we'll go on to the next two parts. A lot of laws where God is saying don't, and I think it's self-explanatory, and some people may find offense at that, but you could question God, but I find with God there's always a good reason why He doesn't want you to do something. If He says don't do it, then there's a good reason. That's, if He says, don't eat fish that don't have scales, it's a good reason He wants you not to do it. Because scavenger fish is just like a scavenger bird, like a vulture. You wouldn't eat a vulture. In your right mind, you wouldn't eat a vulture, because a vulture eats anything dead. So God says don't do it, there must be a good reason. And He said a lot of things here that probably people today would take offense to. But we have to trust that God, there's a good reason He says don't do it. Don't do it. Okay. We'll take a break and go on. Let her. The social will, part 2, and it's Deuteronomy 22nd chapter, 13th verse to 24th chapter, 22nd verse. A man marries a woman and cohabits with her. Then he takes an aversion to her and makes up charges against her and defames her, saying, I married this woman, but when I approached her, I found that she was not a virgin. In such a case, the girl's father and mother shall produce the evidence of the girl's virginity before the elders of the town at the gate. And the girl's father shall say to the elders, I gave this man my daughter to wife, but he has taken an aversion to her. So he has made up charges, saying, I did not find your daughter a virgin, but here's the evidence of my daughter's virginity. And they shall spread out the cloth before the elders of the town. The elders of that town shall then take the man and flog him, and they shall fine him 100 shekels of silver, and give it to the girl's father, for the man has defamed a virgin in Israel. Moreover, she shall remain his wife. He shall never have the right to divorce her. But if the charge proves true, the girl was found not to have been a virgin, then the girl shall be brought out to the entrance of her father's house, and the men of the town shall stone her to death. For she did a shameful thing in Israel, committing fornication while under her father's authority. Thus she will sweep away evil from your midst. If a man is found lying with another man's wife, both of them, the man and the woman, with whom he lay, shall die. Thus you will sweep away evil from Israel. In the case of a virgin who is engaged to a man, if a man comes upon her in a town and lies with her, you shall take the two of them out to the gate of the town and stone them to death. the girl because she did not cry for help in the town, and the man because he violated his neighbor's wife. Thus you shall sweep away evil from your midst. But if the man comes upon the engaged girl in the open country, and the man lies with her by force, only the man who lay with her shall die. But you shall do nothing to the girl. The girl did not incur the death penalty, for this case is like that of a man attacking another and murdering him. He came upon her in the open. Though the engaged girl cried for help, there was no one to save her. If a man comes upon a virgin who is not engaged, and he seizes her and lies with her, and they are discovered, the man who lay with her shall pay the girl's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he has violated her. He can never have the right to divorce her. No man shall marry his father's former wife, so as to remove his father's garments. No one whose testes are crushed or whose member is cut off shall be admitted into the congregation of the Lord. No one misbegotten shall be admitted into the congregation of the Lord. None of his descendants, even in the 10th generation, shall be admitted into the congregation of the Lord. No Ammonite or Moabite shall be admitted into the congregation of the Lord. None of their descendants, even in the 10th generation, shall ever be admitted into the congregation of the Lord, because they did not meet you with food and water on your journey after you left Egypt. Because they hired Balaam, son of Beor, from Pethar of Aram Naharaim, to curse you. But the Lord your God refused to heed Balaam. Instead, the Lord your God turned the curse into a blessing for you. For the Lord your God loves you. You shall never concern yourself with their welfare or benefit as long as you live. You shall not abhor an Edomite, for he is your kinsman. You should not abhor an Egyptian, for you were a stranger in his land. Children born to them may be admitted into the congregation of the Lord in the 3rd generation. When you go out as a troop against your enemies, be on your guard against anything untoward. If anyone among you who has been rendered unclean by a nocturnal emission, he must leave the camp. He must not re-enter the camp. Toward evening he shall bathe in water. At sundown he may re-enter the camp. Further, there shall be an area for you outside the camp where you may relieve yourself. With your gear you shall have a spike, and when you have squatted you shall dig a hole with it and cover up your excrement. Since the Lord your God moves about in your camp to protect you and to deliver your enemies to you, let your camp be holy. Let him not find anything unseemly among you and turn away from you. You shall not turn over to his master a slave who seeks refuge with you from his master. He shall live with you in any place he may choose among the settlements in your midst, wherever he pleases. You must not ill-treat him. No Israelite woman shall be a cult prostitute, nor shall any Israelite man be a cult prostitute. You shall not bring the fee of a whore or pay of a dog into the house of the Lord your God in fulfillment of any vow, for both of abhorrent to the Lord your God. You shall not deduct interest from loans to your countrymen, whether in money or food or anything else that can be deducted in interest. You may deduct interest from the loans to foreigners, but do not deduct any from loans to your countrymen, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all of your undertakings in the land which you are about to invade and occupy. When you make a vow to the Lord your God, do not put off fulfilling it, for the Lord your God will require it of you, and you will have incurred guilt. Whereas you incur no guilt if you refrain from vowing. You must fulfill what has crossed your lips and perform what you have voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God, having made the promise with your own mouth. When you enter your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat your fill of grapes, as many as you want, but you must not put any in your vessel. When you find yourself amid your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck ears with your hand, but you must not put a sickle to your neighbor's grain. A man takes a wife and possesses her. She fails to please him because he finds something obnoxious about her. He writes her a bill of divorcement, hands it to her, and sends her away from his house. She leaves his household and becomes the wife of another man. Then this latter man rejects her, writes her a bill of divorcement, hands it to her, and sends her away from his house, or the man who married her last dies. Then the first husband who divorced her shall not take her to wife again, since she has been defiled, for that would be abhorrent to the Lord. You must not bring sin upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you as a heritage. When a man has taken a bride, he shall not go out with the army or be assigned to it for any purpose. He shall be exempt 1 year for the sake of his household, to give happiness to the woman he has married. A handmill or upper millstone shall not be taken in pawn, for that would be taking someone's life in pawn. If a man is found to have kidnapped a fellow Israelite, enslaving him or selling him, that kidnapper shall die. Thus you will sweep out evil from your midst. In cases of a skin affection, be most careful to do exactly as the Levitical priests instruct you. Take care to do as I have commanded them. Remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam on the journey after you left Egypt. When you make a loan of any sort to your neighbor, you must not enter his house to seize his pledge. You must remain outside, while the man to whom you made the loan brings the pledge out to you. If he is a needy man, you shall not go to sleep in his pledge. You must return the pledge to him at sundown, that he may sleep in his cloth and bless you. And it will be to your merit before the Lord your God. You shall not abuse a needy and destitute laborer, whether a fellow countryman or a stranger in one of the communities in your land. You must pay him his wages on the same day before the sun sets, for he is needy and urgently depends on it. Else he will cry to the Lord against you, and you will incur guilt. Parents shall not be put to death for children, nor children be put to death for parents. A person shall be put to death only for his own crime. You shall not subvert the rights of a stranger or the fatherless. You shall not take a widow's garment in pawn. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and that the Lord your God redeemed you from there. Therefore do I enjoin you to observe this commandment. When you reap the harvest in your field, and overlook a sheaf in the field, do not turn back to get it. It shall go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, in order that the Lord your God may bless you in all your undertakings. When you beat down the fruit of your olive trees, do not go over them again. That shall go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, do not pick it over again. That shall go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. Always remember that you were slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore do I enjoin you to observe this commandment. I think one of the most important, I'd like to reiterate that when God is giving these commandments for the protection of Israel, and God has said repeatedly, there's one law for everybody. Yes, he gives this to Israel, but he's also giving it to the stranger, those who are not part of, who are maybe not born into Israel. So, but it's always one law. There's no law but this law. There's one law. And I think, to me, during my many studies, one question I just like to put this idea out there. I'm not saying that you have to believe what I'm going to put out here, but I'm just putting out there to make you think. One question I always ask is, I ask myself, why did Jesus have to die? And we know that his death resulted in salvation for mankind. But my question is a little deeper in that, okay, why was his death so important? Why did he have to die in order to bring salvation? And I found the answer in Deuteronomy in this part. And I urge you to study this part, because it all has to do, when we're talking about God, we're talking about covenants. God gives covenants. And a covenant is a binding agreement. It's just like if you were in a legal system and you go in and the legal document is drawn, you have to adhere to the legal document. If you don't adhere to it, there could be consequences. And basically, this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the legal system, but God is the one who's in charge of giving the rules and what the rules and commandments are. But just think about this one, and on your leisure time, study this. To me, this is why Jesus had to die. And it's all involving the commandments that God gave. That's why these commandments are important. We may not understand why God said do it, but this is important. And here it is in Deuteronomy, the 24th chapter, and allow me to read it over again for you. A man takes a wife and possesses her. She fails to please him because he finds something obnoxious about her. He writes her a bill of divorcement, hands it to her, sends her away from his house. She leaves his household and becomes the wife of another man. Then this latter man rejects her, writes her a bill of divorcement, hands it to her, and sends her away from his house. Or the man who remarried her, the man who married her last dies. Then the first husband who divorced her shall not take her again to wife, or take to wife again, since she has been defiled. For that would be abhorrent to the Lord. You must not bring a sin upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you as a heritage. And the bill of divorcement, God talks about that a lot with Israel. You read in Isaiah, maybe in Ezekiel too, but I know not Isaiah also. Well, God talks about giving a bill of divorcement because God is Israel's husband. And if you'll notice, again, that once the bill of divorcement is given, that first husband cannot marry this wife again once she goes to another man. Can't do it again. So, if God has given a bill of divorcement to Israel, I'm not talking about Judah, I'm talking about Israel, because I did study, and it was mostly on Israel. And Israel, of course, the northern tribes, the 10 tribes, that God, there's a bill of divorcement. And because if there's a bill of divorcement, God cannot remarry that wife, that Israel, that part of Israel. So what's Israel to do? How is Israel to be redeemed? Because this is what this whole book is about. This is what even the New Testament is about. How Israel was redeemed. Yes, as a result of Israel being redeemed, we who are strangers are able to come into the covenant. But this whole thing is about redeeming Israel. This unfaithful wife who God has given a bill of divorcement, and he cannot remarry her again because she's been defiled. God clearly says it over and over again. You've been defiled with idols. You've been, whoring with idols. And what's the good one to read? Is it Habakkuk? Not Habakkuk. Hosea. Hosea is a good book to read. But it tells you about Hosea taking a wife of low esteem or whatever. But God cannot remarry this wife, his first love. He cannot remarry her because she's whored with other men. So what's the solution? How can God then redeem Israel? Redeem in the sense of remarrying her. How can he repossess her when she's been whoring? How can she do it? And again, it's all in looking at covenants. In the New Testament, it clearly states that it's either in Hebrews, also in Romans, I believe. It says that once the will is only in effect when someone dies. Then the will goes into effect. And the other will, if they had another will, the new will becomes the one that's in effect whenever someone dies. And so that's why Jesus had to die. He had to die in order to redeem Israel and to redeem us. Because it is all about covenants. And here, what God said right here, this passage right here is the kicker of why Jesus had to die for our sins. Again, don't believe me. Matter of fact, study it to death, but you'll find again, if you think of the relationship God has with Israel as that of a husband and wife, and that she's been unfaithful. Once she's been unfaithful, he gives her that bill of divorcement again. That's it. And he never stops loving her, and he wants to take her back, but he can't, because what his own rules prevent him from taking her back. But God had a plan all along, And that plan was once this husband dies, and this is a supernatural, that negates anything. Once the person dies, that's it. Like if you hear the vows, it said to death do us part. Once your spouse dies, that releases you from that marriage legally. And you don't have to worry about whether you can remarry. You can't, because you've been released, because what? Your spouse dies. Then here, only God can do this, because he's the only one who can come. I mean, he transcend death. He dies and he rises again and redeems this unfaithful bride. He redeems her. And again, it's as simple as that, but it's also as complicated. But anyway, this commandment right here explains the gospel of why God has he's transcended these rules right here. And I think that's one thing that the enemy didn't count on. He didn't count on God dying and then resurrecting. He didn't count on that one. Didn't see that one coming. So anyway, study it. Just something to throw out there for you. But it answered the question for me, why Jesus had to die in order to redeem Israel and mankind. Okay, what you all think on this section?
Well, I'm not, the comment I have is in verse 23,
Okay.
Verse 7, and not necessarily the Edomites, but it says, "You shall not abhor," and that word I want to key on is abhor, an Edomite, and you shouldn't abhor an Egyptian. Now, when Israel was in, or when the Jews were in Egypt, they were treated badly. They were enslaved. They were killed. The most horrendous treatment you could even think of in being enslaved. You could maybe even compare it to the Holocaust. But this slavery lasted a couple of hundred years, where Holocaust may have lasted maybe 10 or so. But you shouldn't, God said we shouldn't abhor them. And the reason, why shouldn't you hate, abhor Egyptian? Well, one commentator says, well, because they give you a place to stay. You were in their land, you ate food from their land, and also if they didn't want you there, they could have driven you out, or they could have killed you. So he also mentioned that you should not give up on the Egyptian either. So it's a matter of, what did I say? Well, don't give up on their humanity. And but I can think the idea is you shouldn't abhor them just because they treated you badly for a long time. And I wonder if that was a parallel to slavery, because slavery was horrendous. You know, we shouldn't abhor the slave master, because when the South knew they were going to lose the war, they could have gone and killed every slave there was. Even before the fight started, they could, one way to end slavery, hey, kill all the slaves. But they didn't kill us all. We were still on the land. Some, after the war was over, you could leave and go other places. But I see perhaps there's a lesson there that we can learn from, where God commanded the Jews not to abhor the Egyptian because of their enslavement. Perhaps there's a lesson we can learn from that as well. Now, the Edomites were their brothers, and I forget how that I don't remember the lineage for that.
Edom and Jacob and Esau.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was thinking at first, but I said, well, maybe not. Okay, but that's the only comment I have with that one. I know it talked about a lady who was raped in the city, but she didn't cry out. And the one in the country, where she did cry out, but no one was there to listen. One commentator paralleled that to the type of prayers we make. Sometimes our prayers, we cry out, and then there are prayers from the heart, and then there are prayers that we can't even sort out. So we can't even verbalize them, but we ask God. I guess the idea is to ask God to help us untangle those prayers so we can verbalize them. So God even knows the prayers that we can't even say, or even we have no way of saying them. Remember one guy, a preacher said, when you pray to God silently, talk very low, so the devil won't hear you. And I thought that was funny. I don't know what made him think that, but technically you don't even have to speak a prayer, and God knows what's on your mind or in your heart. So. And even there's some prayers that are so hard that you can't even sort them out.
There are no words. There are no words to sort them out. There are no words. You can't find the words. Some prayers.
Yeah, some can. Well, right. They're so tangled up you can't even verbalize them. But those are two of the things I got from here. But as I said, there's a lot of commandments there.
Yes. And I still say that the commandments, again, God gave them to Israel for their good. He didn't just throw out words and say, I'm just going to just throw out some words. They are for their good. And that's why they're so important to know, for us to know, because obviously if God is God and He is who He says He is, He's the creator of the universe, then obviously He knows what's best for us. So we should not poo-poo these commandments. We should take them to heart and try and obey them, because they would be best for us in the long run. And I, want to piggyback on what you said about slavery, and then about the slavery in the U.S. And what God says here, what did He tell them to not to, I guess, hold a grudge against the Egyptians because of it, and I see people trying to make us hold grudges against our former captives, which does no good. If you're just holding a grudge and to become bitter, holding a grudge for I don't know, and to exact revenge. What kind of revenge are you going to exact for something that really didn't affect you? It affected your forefathers. You had nothing to do with it. And also the way I look at it, and I don't know if a lot of people realize it, the slavery in the Bible is a little different. I said just a teeny bit different from the slavery in the U.S. But in the Bible, the slave could become part of the family. It wasn't looked at just as chattel, and you could never be part of the family. Yeah, they could become. But also in American history, the slaves were part of the family. Sometimes they were acknowledged, sometimes they weren't. But we have a real tangled history with slavery, in that we're kind of all mixed up. We're kind of all related. We are related whether we want to admit it or not. We're related simply because just what happened. I don't know if all of the relationships were unwanted or whatever it was. Some of it was consensual, I know, and some of it wasn't consensual, maybe. But in the end, what do you get? You get people who are related, and even in my history, I can speak that based on the census records, we got some different blood other than African blood. Now, what is Indian, Irish, whatever? I don't know. Chinese, I don't know, but it's not all African. So we are related to those who enslaved us. And so that's one reason you maybe don't want to hold a grudge against it, because we're related. But anyway, I hope somebody gets something positive from that discussion. Okay, now we go to the last part, the third part, the social wheel. Did you have anything for there? I'm sorry. Okay. That's the part 3, and it's from Deuteronomy 25th chapter, first verse through the 19th. So it's 19 verses, John, and it's all yours if you want it.
Okay.
Okay.
If there is a dispute between men and they come to court, that the judge may judge them, and they justify the righteous and condemn the wicked, then it shall be, if the wicked then desires to be beaten, that the judge will cause him to lie down and be beaten in his presence, according to his guilt, with a certain number of blows. 40 blows he may give him, and no more, lest he shall exceed that which beats him with many blows above these, and their brothers be humiliated in your sight. You shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the corn. If brothers dwell together, and one of them dies and have no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. The husband's brother shall go to her and take her as his wife, and perform the duties of a husband's brother to her. And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. But if the man does not want to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up a name to my brother in Israel. He will not perform the duties of my husband's brother. Then the elders of that city shall call him and speak to him. But if he stands firm and says, I do not want to take her, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandals from his foot, spit in his face, and answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house. And his name shall be called in Israel, the house of him who had his sandals removed. If two men fight together, and the wife of one draws near to rescue her husband from the hand of the one attacking him, and put out her hand and seizes him by his genitals, then he shall cut off her hand. Your eye shall not pity her. You shall not have in your bag differing weights, heavy and a light. You shall not put in your house differing measures, a large and a small. You shall have a perfect and a just weight, a perfect and a just measure, that your days may be lengthened in the land which the Lord your God is giving you. For all who do such thing, all who behave unrighteously, are an abomination to the Lord your God. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you were going out of Egypt, how they met you in the way and attacked your rear ranks. All the strangers at your rear when you were tired and weary, and they did not fear the Lord, fear God. Therefore it shall be when the Lord your God has given you rest from your enemies, all around, in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess as an inheritance, that you shall blot out the remembrance of Ephemelech from under heaven. You shall not forget. Couple of things. I guess I should have made a note while I was going through. One struck me. Well, one, that you shouldn't have different weights. That's just, you shouldn't cheat folks. You know, a just weight. God is after justice and righteousness, and you should be honest with folks. This one guy who did not want to take his who died, and the other brother didn't want to take his wife. I think about Ruth, and I don't know fully the meaning of that, but maybe that's a terrible name. The one who had his sandal, he'd be known as the one who had his sandals removed. Maybe call him barefoot. I don't know. It's a ritual, but it's an interesting ritual. Also, the early one about the 40 lashes. I know I've heard that some, when they're punished with the 40 lashes, some of them, some groups, when they do the punishment, they don't give 40 lashes. They give 39 just to make sure they don't go over the 40. Maybe in case they miscounted one. So they're sure to give one less than what the law requires so they don't go over. I thought that was interesting. So sometimes when they talk 39 lashes, it's the idea of, well, I don't want to go over. And that was it. That's what they're trying to adhere to. But I think that's the only the comment I have. I guess even with the Abimelech, they wanted to I think they wanted to even buy bread and water and just to pass through, but they didn't. They wanted to come out and fight them, and that was the reason they went to war with them. I think that was the group.
Okay. I wanted to say something about the I went to get the right name. Yeah, Tamar. One of the, again, so we can use some of these laws. They're used practically within the Torah, and the ones where on chapter 25, verse 5, and it talks about the brother leaves no son, and the wife and he leaves no sons. That happened in Judah's circumstance. Remember, where Judah's sons, I think, died and did not leave any children. And Tamar,
I remember that.
Yes, and as David was pleading, she was invoking this right here, these commandments, telling him, asking him that when his, I forgot the son, she was waiting for him to get of age so that he could build up, marry her. But it didn't happen, and so what she did, rightfully so, she then dressed herself as a prostitute, remember, and she got Judah to father her children. So again, she was using the law in the Torah in order to justify her actions. Because David, when he found out, they were saying she's pregnant, and he says, well, she's going to be whoever she was, who's the father, will be killed, and she will be killed too. And then he had left his staff and a ring. She said, well, this is the father of my children, and it was his staff and his
Was
ring.
that David or someone else?
That was Judah.
Okay.
Judah.
When you mentioned David, I was thinking.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said David. I meant Judah.
Okay.
Judah, and Tamar.
Right.
Was her name. So again, what saved her was that she was not acting outside of Torah. She knew the Torah enough to know that she was within her right to have children. Somebody father them. All right.
Well, plus he made that promise and didn't live up to it.
Yes, he didn't live up to the promise. All right, so we've gotten some laws, but again, they build a groundwork of what happens in the Torah. They're not just laws; they're things that God says, "This is if you obey these laws, it will go well with you," and that's what He's saying. And we have to always remember that. We may not understand the laws. We may not understand why. It's just like a parent with a child. When you tell your child, well, well, I wouldn't do this if I were you. Well, you have the experience. Your kid doesn't. And you would hope your child would say, I trust in my parent and I'm going to do what the parent says. So, and God is our Father. If He says this is not good for you to do, then we need to heed Him and do what He says to do. All right, we are getting closer again to Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. It's at the end of the month. We're in September. And so our next Parsha for next week is called Ki-tça. When you enter the land. Ki-tça from Deuteronomy 26 chapter 1st verse to 29th chapter 9th verse. And it starts out, V'haya ki-tavo el haaretz asher Adonai Elohecha noten lecha nechala berishta ve'yishvata ba ve'lechakta marshit kol pri ha'adama asher tavoi me'artzecha asher Adonai Elohecha noten la ve'samta betana ve'halchata el hamakom asher yavachar Adonai Elohecha leshchen shmo sham. When you enter the land that the Lord your God is giving you as a heritage, and you occupy it and settle in it, you shall take some of every fruit of the soil which you harvest from the land that the Lord your God is giving you, put it in a basket, and go to the place where the Lord your God will choose to establish His name. We're getting a Christian. No, Moses is getting ready to die, and he's giving basically his last will and testimony, what Israel should do in order to become a great nation. We look forward to celebrating Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Very important time. And then Sukkot. Because remember, Sukkot is the time that the Messiah was born, that Jesus was born. Not at Christmas, as some may think, but at Sukkot. And it is an 8-day festival. And I've been researching Sukkot, and it is really amazing. You may want to start researching Sukkot, because the Jewish people are commanded to be happy. I mean, it's you must be happy. And why do you think you must be happy? And remember also, there's a connection between the time that Jesus died and the time that He was born. The time that He was born is an 8-day festival. The time He died is also an 8-day festival. Remember, Passover and then the 7 days of Matzot. So here's something big happening. God didn't just say one day; He gave it 8 days. Each festival is 8 days. So that's why it's exciting. So you have no doubt. God has a pattern. God just doesn't throw things out. There's always a pattern, and the pattern fits. Time that Yeshua died, 8 days. The time that He was born, 8 days. So we look forward to celebrating Sukkot, because we're going to have a really special time. We're going to have a really, really special time planned. So we look forward to that. And also Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. With best intention, I always try to get a song, and I didn't get it. It's one song I wanted to get, but I need to print the words for you. So, I know. I'll teach you a Hebrew song. Teach your Hebrew song. Very easy. And the English words are, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. I'll sing the Hebrew for you, and then we'll sing the English, and then we'll sing the Hebrew and then the English. Very simple. Baruch haba b'Shem Adonai, Hallelujah. Baruch haba b'Shem Adonai, Hallelujah. Baruch haba b'Shem Adonai, Baruch haba b'Shem Adonai. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. In Hebrew, Baruch haba b'Shem Adonai, Hallelujah. Baruch haba b'Shem Adonai, Hallelujah. Baruch haba b'Shem Adonai, Baruch haba b'Shem Adonai. In English, blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. And that's what we have to look forward to on Sukkot, remembering that he came in the name of the Lord, didn't come in his name. He came on this 8-day festival. He was born during this 8-day festival of Sukkot. And we will celebrate the fact that he was born in this time. And we look forward to that. Well, we wish you a Shavua Tov, a good week, a blessing, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
All right.